caring faculty member, I always make sure to say that after getting to know her, a lot of students have taken her class for anatomy and physiology, and for the past year, she has done multiple time management and note-taking workshops for a lot of Catholic students, and a lot of students that are in our HCUP, LA Health Academy program. So we're so grateful to her. She crafted this, and it's an effective tool that, again, you should definitely use throughout your life. So thank you, Dr.
Thanks. A couple of you, I think, came in after I handed these out. You need one? How are you looking? Everybody got one? Okay, thanks. Okay, so I'm Dr. Barr. My preference, though, is that my students call me Dr. B, just a little less formal. And I started developing this stuff just in listening to my own students and what they would talk about and where they needed help. And, you know, all of a sudden they're in college and they're supposed to know how to do it, and that doesn't work so well. And so, and one of the things was always time management, that they always had some other professor go, why do you need to learn some time management? And I think the response from the student should be, well, why don't you teach that to me, right? And the reality is, I don't think a lot of professors know what time management is either. And so, but they just tell you, you need to do it, right? So anyway, that was kind of where that started for me. And then I've developed a whole lot of other things, kind of an academic success boot camp. And I think, you know, just getting a jump on how to have these skills is better than having to figure it out along the way. The other thing too is, like, this stuff on time management, this is how I do it. This is how I live my life. And I guarantee what I show you today, you can walk in my office any day, anytime, summer, fall, spring, and you will see these different things on my desk. This is how I do it. And I had to learn how to manage time. As a student, from the time I was a junior in college, I worked full-time. I was a full-time student. I get the difficulty balancing that. You know, you got to do it all without hopefully going insane. And once I learned how to do it, I didn't know that that's what I was doing. I just felt like I got to get some organization here because I'm forgetting things. I'm not getting things done. And so I didn't know what I was actually doing was time management. But it changed my life, and I started getting things done and not forgetting things that yesterday they were important. Today they are urgent. If I don't get it done, I'm in trouble. And so that's just kind of where this stuff came from. And so the time management seems to be the most popular one. So that's what we're going to do today. So what I want you to do, first of all, time management is 2 steps. The first part is planning. So the first thing I want you to do is just go down this little, how well do you plan, circle the numbers there, and then add up your total, and we'll see kind of where you all land in this thing. Yeah. Yes. And then for your scoring, you want to look up here. I know it's kind of small, but it's the only way I can get everything on the slide. Here's the bottom line. If you're somewhere between 6 and 10, you're a terrible planner. I probably can't help you anyway. Actually, if you're hopefully somewhere over 10, but less than 26, right? If you're over 26, that means you're such an over planner, you're a candidate for burnout. We need you to tone it down a little bit. So if as long as you're somewhere between that 10 and 26, did we all land somewhere between 10 and 26? Hopefully. okay? And I very rarely have people land on either end. And you know what, if you're down here, if you're an excellent planner, that's almost too much of a good thing. You planned yourself into total burnout. I have yet to have anybody end up in this category, although I can tell you from experience, I at one time drifted into this category, and that's not a good place to be. So you don't need to plan every second of your life. Okay, so first of all, you guys, what is time management? Okay, it's planning for everything you have to do. But number two, you have to execute it. If you plan, but you don't execute, you're not good at time management. You're a good planner, right? And so that is, I think, one of the hardest parts is it's easy to come up with a plan, but committing to following that plan and doing it can be difficult. All right, so the next thing is, well, do I really need to manage my time? And I can just say, yes, you do. As a student right now, you do, but when you become a professional, some of you may be doing double duty already. Absolutely, you need to manage your time. And in school, you have to, you guys, because studying just does not happen. You have to plan it. And you all know, how many times have you done this? You know you have an exam on Monday. You go, well, I'm going to study it all day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then you go, well, I still have Saturday, Sunday. And then you go, okay, Sunday. And then Monday, you're like, dang, right? Everybody does this. So studying, it just doesn't happen. You do have to plan for it. And this, based on research, time managers in college, right? People who do this, first of all, they know why they're in college. They are not here just because it's something to do. They are here because they have a purpose. They have a goal. They know what they want to accomplish. What do I want out of this education, out of this degree? The other thing too is they actually keep time schedules. That's part of time management, is keeping an actual time schedule. Okay, so you guys, this time management, it's a method. It's 3 different things. You don't do one, you do all 3. And this is how you manage your time. So you all have a handout with a term calendar. You have a sample of a weekly calendar and a daily to-do list. And what we're going to do is just go down those things, and I'll just tell you, here's what you do with it. Here's how this works. Probably the weekly calendar we'll spend the most time on, but I've given you guidelines for what goes on there. The other thing too is there's room for tweaking this. You can, if there's a little bit of variation that you want to do to make it just so it works for you, you do that. But the basics should still be the same. So, okay, so the keys to time management. Number 1, now you guys, this right now is tailored for students. When you become a professional, it might take, you know, a little bit different form. But in terms of academic success, the first thing we're going to talk about is a term calendar. And you guys, it kind of goes like this. Here's your term calendar. Here's your weekly calendar. Here's your daily to-do list. And they're 3 very different schedules, okay? So first of all, your term calendar. And if you all turn to, okay, so I put in, here's an example of a term calendar for the upcoming semester. By the way, you guys, all of my calendars and stuff, I download from a site called Calendarpedia, and you can get any type of calendar that you want in Word or Excel or PDF, and it's free, and that's just how I do it, okay? Okay, so here's what you do with your term calendar. When you get all of your syllabi from your courses, you're gonna sit down and you're gonna write the big things. You're gonna write, I have an exam this date. You're gonna write, I have, you know, a paper due. Maybe you have a quiz, but you write down what are the big things. And you want it all on a single list like this, right? You don't want to have it multiple pages. You want to have all the big things on here. You want to really avoid putting personal stuff on there, like Sammy's birthday, you know, stuff like that. You want to avoid that. I mean, if you're getting married, you might want to just star that. Might need a little extra time there or something. But you know, you don't want to get bogged down in the personal stuff. This is about your academic calendar. Okay. So the other thing too that I recommend is one of the and again, this is stuff that I see from my own students, undergrads, but also grad students. So they got this big project due, term paper. Or if you're a grad student, you've got your thesis. Or sometimes my honors students with their big honors project. And what they look at is, oh my gosh, this is what I have to get done, this thing. And all they focus on is the big thing. My job is to say, okay, let's start with a review of literature. Let's break it down. And I want that review of literature by this date. Once you've got that, okay, how are you going to develop your study? What do you want to do? That's called your methods. And I want it by this date. And I help them break it down. And it doesn't really matter, what it is. Get out of the big thing at the due date and break it down into, you can break it down into obvious sections and give yourself your own due dates. By this time I want to have my introduction done. By this time I want to have my lit review or whatever, and put that on there. But I always suggest, don't focus on the end product. It's going to come. Focus on the process to get there. Okay, so again, you guys, very few personal events, only if there's something major on there, okay? Here's key with this. This should be wherever you spend a lot of time studying or whatever, have that visible all the time. Tape it up on your cabinet or pin it to the back of your bulletin board or whatever, but you want to see that every single day so that you always know what's coming up. But also too, that's why you want to have that whole term so you can see, this is what I've got going for the next 4 months. Okay, make sense so far? And same thing, you guys. You can stop me at any time. I will have my little briefcase that I carry because it looks all teachery. Really, it has like dry erase markers and stuff like that. But it has my term calendar in it. It also has my, for classes, I don't do a weekly calendar. I have it by the month. So I can see what in every single class, what they've got going. Right? On my desk, you'll see the third thing, which is the to-do list as well. So, all right, so that's our term calendar. We all clear on that? Pretty easy. Okay, the weekly schedule. And this, you guys, this is really the key. I call it let the little things add up. And what I mean by that is in terms of studying or preparing a project or whatever it is let the little things add up. And let me just tell you kind of how I sort of figured this out is, when I was a student and I was working and I had a 40-hour-a-week job and I had classes and I can't do this, and I literally sat down and I wrote out a weekly calendar to look at where I had little chunks of time. And that was my only option. It was either to go completely insane and study for 40 hours on the weekend or whatever, or it was to start to let those little chunks of time add up. And I just made the decision that Monday through Thursday, I had lunch from 12:30 to 1:30 at my job, and I went in my office and I closed my door and I studied. On Friday, I went to lunch with my colleagues because you don't want to be like totally antisocial. But you know what, that right there gave me 4 hours of study. The other thing too is I realized for me, early in the morning, I have no problem. I get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock. It's not a big thing. And I'm like firing on all cylinders, right? And that's what I used to do. I used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I would study from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. The house was quiet. Mom was firing on all 4 cylinders. And then I would shower and go to work. Okay, but if you think of it, by the end of the day, I'd already had 3 hours of studying it, plus worked 8 hours. Okay, it was hard for me to go to class because once the sun goes down, I'm an idiot, right? And it doesn't matter if I'm tired or not. That's my biorhythms. And so that's another thing is make those work for you. If I have another friend, I swear she's a vampire because as soon as the sun goes down, she's like, right? Like, what are you doing? Sleeping. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right? That's her biorhythms. That's when she does her thing. So don't fight it. Make it work for you, right? I mean, it will take me double the time at night to get done what I can get done in the morning. So why wouldn't I do that? And that's just so letting the little things add up. But now let's do the math on here. Monday through Thursday, I already had 3 hours of studying in. Realistically, by the end of Thursday, I got 12 hours of studying in. Friday, I didn't do anything. And then I would study part of the day Saturday. I never studied on Sundays. I just didn't do it. At some point, you have to say, I have a family, I'd like to keep them. I'd like clean clothes, stuff like that. And you guys, it totally worked, right? It worked. And so just to kind of, that's what I mean with let the little things add up. The big thing I see with my students is they go, well, I only have 30 minutes, it wasn't enough time. That's perfect. You don't have to sit down and study everything at one time. Sit down and study one thing. Let the little things add up, okay? All right, now, you guys, what I did in here was I gave you, it's called making a needs-based calendar, something like that. Here it is, making a schedule based on your needs. And this has a whole lot of guidelines on here. I say pick and choose, use what you like, throw out what doesn't work for you. Some of this stuff does not work for me at all. Okay, but so here's what you do. Now I've given you just a sample of a weekly calendar as well, which is just this, my week like that, okay? All right, now here's what you do, you guys. This is not about the big projects. This is not about the exam. This is about all that stuff that you know is gonna go on in your week. So the first thing, class and lab times. And the easiest way I think to do that, and this is just how I did it, is I would just kind of block out this whole block. And I know I've got class. I also know too, it's gonna take me 30 minutes to get a place to park or whatever. But block out, all that surrounding time, because you should not be studying while you're driving, right? Unless it's audio, that's fine, but you should not be. I don't know if I'd recommend that either. I was taking a French class one time, audio. You ever fall asleep during class? Crash the car. I did. I fell asleep in French class. Oh. Bon appetit. Right, it didn't go well. So. But okay, so you're going to record that stuff. Record mealtime. I don't live my life like that, right? But if you have that rigid kind of thing, that doesn't work for me. Other things, if you have regularly scheduled personal activities, like I always have a faculty meeting Wednesday at 2:30. That's not going to change. I always have my gym at a certain time because it's the only. So put that stuff in there as well. Now, if it's stuff that's irregular, throw that in for just that week, of course. But mine, and you guys, with my weekly calendar, so much of mine is routine that I just do it on my Google thing, so it just keeps regenerating each week, and then I put special things in it. But I think that's a good way to do it too. Any special activities you need or want to do on a regular basis? Okay, so here's 5, 6, 7. These are the things I absolutely want you to put on here, though, because this is about academics. Is if you can, before every class that you go in, schedule anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes, and I would say really it's based on what you have, to just preview what are we talking about today. And it might be that you have a PowerPoint from the instructor that at this point you can't make heads or tails of. That's okay. You're not previewing to learn. You're previewing to create what I call context. What that means is, let's say that you've got a class, it's on bioenergetics. Today, cellular respiration, I don't know what that is, blah, 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 mitochondria, low Krebs cycle, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what any of that is. But now you're sitting in that lecture and I start talking about mitochondria and I start talking about the Krebs cycle. And you're already thinking, oh, wait, okay, I'm pretty sure this is important. It creates context. And believe it or not, you guys, it is actually easier to focus during a lecture if you're kind of anticipating those kind of things, okay? So now, sometimes it's impossible because you don't have anything from the instructor, you got no idea. That's okay too. You can't do anything about that. But if you've got something, and it could be too, that you don't know what they're gonna talk about, but you know the reading assignment is chapter 8, just take a quick glance through chapter 8. It's not about learning the material yet. It's about creating context for the lecture, okay? As important as preview is, review. Now this, you guys, this is not your major studying. This is not, you're not sitting down to get ready for an exam. But as soon as you can, after every lecture, you want to go back, review your notes. And again, to give you some guidelines, 5 to 30 minutes, whatever you have. And I'm going to tell you this, do it as close as you can to the lecture. And I'll tell you why in just a second, but do it as close as you can. Yeah. Yeah, it's really as long as you do it within 24 hours. And what that comes from, there's a lot of research on what's called the forgetting curve. And what that is, okay, when you leave here today with what I've talked about, are you gonna know absolutely everything I talked about? But are you gonna leave here with something? Okay, so whatever you leave here with, by this time tomorrow, you will have forgotten about 25% of it. That's just within 24 hours. Because you guys, right now it's sitting in what's called short-term memory. If you don't do something to move it to long-term, it starts to decay. And what decay really means is you're forgetting. If you wait 48 hours, you're down to about 50% of what we talked about. Wait another day, you're down to about 20%. And you guys, you know this has happened. Have you ever sat down to study for an exam? You've got your notes and you're like, did we even talk about this? I wrote all this, but I have zero recollection. It has completely decayed. And so what studying really is it's moving it from that short term to the long term. Well, it starts with, if you just start reviewing, that actually is a form of studying. It's not going to get you through a whole exam, but you're starting to move that from short to long term. Because you guys, the reality is when you sit down to study for an exam, the more you already have, the easier it's going to be. But if you're having to completely teach yourself something from scratch, and you know you've done it, I know I did it. I mean, you're just setting yourself up for such a more difficult time, right? So schedule that review. All right, 7, you want to also schedule that intensive study time where now you are going to sit down. And it might be only 30 minutes, but it might be 2 hours. And that really depends on what you can do. I personally, you guys, I think if you're going to schedule, like for me, I would schedule as an undergrad study times of like 5 hours. It didn't mean I was going to sit in that chair and study for 5 hours. Then I was going to study for an hour, cruise around the library, look at stupid stuff, come back, study for another hour. Now go down to the scary basement in the library. See who's living down there, whatever. Come back, study for another hour, but break it up in chunks. Okay? The other thing too is, I'm going to tell you this, physical activity is one of the best things you can do in terms of studying, because when you are physically active, there's a byproduct called lactate. Lactate ends up at your brain, and it's actually fuel for your brain. It is the number one thing your brain likes to burn. So you know how if you're kind of falling asleep, you go, oh, okay. Oh, I'm kind of awake now. Okay, the reason you're awake is not because of this. It's because of the lactate that was produced as a result of making the energy to do this. But you know how you're like, okay, I'm firing again. That's lactate. So when you are feeling a little, I don't know, just, and it can be something as simple as stand up, jump up and down 10 times. You will have produced enough lactate. You're going to be firing on all cylinders again. Okay, so schedule that intensive review. At some point, you guys, what you really should do is sit down and do a weekly review. And kind of like, this is part of how I did it. So I had my this is how I studied Monday through Thursday. Friday, didn't do a whole lot. Saturday, I would study. And what I did at the end of everything is I would just kind of do like a 30-minute kind of overview of everything. Not just what I had spent the day studying, but kind of the whole class. So you want to do that. Physical activity. This is not just what I hope, this is what research shows. You guys, physical activity, it is not only important for your physical health, but it's so important for your mental health, for your soul. So you want to have physical activity, and ideally, if you can do that every single day, that would be great. Even a walk in the arboretum, right? It all counts. And then have some open time. Stuff will pop up. You know, you never know. And so don't schedule yourself so tight that you don't have any flexibility in every single day. And then leave yourself some playtime, whatever I want to do, right? And that's your reward. So lots goes into the weekly calendar. There's not a perfect recipe here. You kind of pick and choose what works for you. But in terms of academic success, preview, review, intensive study, overview. Absolutely schedule those in, okay? You have any questions so far? It's pretty easy, right? It's just a matter of doing it. Okay, here's the last part. Yeah.
For the flexibility part, would you schedule, like, say, like, this is my time for study, but if something comes up, like some personal need, you can take that time.
Yeah.
And then you would replace the study?
Yeah, you know, if part of what I'm going to show you in just a few minutes is something called understanding what's important that you need to get done today, what's urgent that you must get done. Sometimes the both. What's not important, but at some point you got to get it done. What is not important, what's going to become urgent, right? And kind of understanding what you have to do. And the thing is, this is what I find is, once you kind of get a jump and you kind of get ahead of everything, that you automatically have flexibility. If something pops up, I can push that to tomorrow. I can do that. Because of what I try not to do, I don't let things become urgent. If I know I have to get this done by a certain date, it's done ahead of time. And so it gives me that flexibility if I need to move something. But here's the thing, you guys, if you're going to do that as a student, you have to start day one. What too many students do is they don't do any of this, and now, exams. And now for a week, you're cramming for the exam and you let every other class go. Now, another exam. And the thing is, once you get behind academically, it is so hard to get in front of that ball again. Do you guys, I see half of you going, yeah, yeah. The other half of you want to, you're just like. But I see it all the time. I did it too. I did it too as a young student. And I think that's why I hated college my freshman year, because all I ever did was play catch up and pull all-nighters. And then I'd be kind of pissed that I only got a C. The reality is I should have been going, thanks. Because but yeah, that's the thing, is that if you can really get ahead of the game on here, you know, you have flexibility when you need it if stuff pops up. Because the reality is there's always going to be stuff you didn't see that one coming. And so, but again, you've got to get ahead of that ball. Which is why I'm glad I'm doing this now, instead of like I'll do in the fall, in, you know, August or September. But by then I've already got undergrads who are already behind the ball. And so, all right, so here's the daily to-do list. Now, you guys, this is the key to daily efficiency. Honestly, it is the key to getting stuff done. And that's that daily to-do list. So I put a different example, and I put that one in because it's a different website that I really like for other things. Here it is. This one, daily to-do list. Mine looks nothing like this. Mine's a blank piece of paper with writing all over it. But this website is called Mind Tools. This is a really good website for not only students, but for professionals, and it's all type of development stuff, one of which is there's a time management folder. But there's all kinds of great stuff on that website. Okay, so the thing, you guys, with daily to-do lists, and I'll give you an example of who needs a daily to-do list. Have you ever known in the morning you had a really important email that you should have sent, and then you wake up the next day and you go, oh, I didn't do it. Oh, I forgot to pay this bill. Oh, could have had an exam today, right? You ever done that, right? If you have ever had something important, possibly urgent, that the reality is you forgot to do. If you ever feel like I am so unorganized, or how many of you, you know, in the morning, just, you know, you're getting ready and you're already freaking out about everything you have to do. How will I ever get all of this done? You ever had that? you need a daily to-do list. It is the key to being organized and being efficient. It is absolutely the key to getting stuff done. And I was telling Anna, I meant to bring mine this morning because I do this every day. I have my daily to-do list. And I think I had 12 things on it. I've already scratched off about 8 of them. Okay, if they were floating around in my head, I maybe would have 1 or 2 of them done, but I would have been on Facebook, Twitter, just doing whatever. But I see all this stuff, I gotta get this done, and I just start scratching stuff off, okay? And I haven't been here since 3 a.m., so, like 7:30. Okay, so the other thing too, you guys, is when you actually write down all of those little things you have to do, it's not study time, it's not exams. It is, I got to email this person. I knew I needed to make copies of this. I knew I needed to go on and find that the fall term calendar, format that and get that printed out, right? When you write it all down, then what you do is you prioritize. What do I need to get done first? It is too easy to do the menial stuff. Like, I'll tell you straight up, when I was a grad student, mopping the floor looked so attractive compared to studying, right? I mean, my apartment was spotless when I was a student because I would rather scour that bathtub for the 8th time this week than study for biochemistry, right? It's too easy to focus on the stuff that isn't important. But when you actually start writing it down and you prioritize, what do I really need to do? It's much easier to do things. Now that I am not a student, sometimes I'm like, dang, that floor needs mopped. I'm not doing it today. So, okay. But, and the other thing too, you guys, you got to find the to-do list that works for you. So I just wanted to give you an example. Mine literally is a blank piece of paper and I just scribble all over it. Certain things are at angles. I don't know why I do that, but to me that tells me, yeah, you could get this today maybe. Do this today. So use what works for you. But before you do this, figuring out what do I need to get done first, I wanted to share with you something called It's Eisenhower's urgent important principle. You guys know who Dwight Eisenhower? Heard of that guy? He was a president. You know. And Dwight Eisenhower was known for getting a lot of stuff done every single day. That guy he was apparently just a powerhouse of efficiency. And this was after he was president. He was giving a speech and he was talking about efficiency. And this is a quote. He said, I have 2 kinds of problems, the urgent and the important. The urgent are not important. And the important are never urgent. Well, okay, what the chicken does that mean? Well, let's figure out what's the difference between urgent and important. And why is it that Eisenhower never let something that was important become urgent? Because it was important, he got it done. He also recognized the difference. Something is urgent, but I don't have to get this done right now because it doesn't really affect me, right? And so he recognized what's the urgent that I have to get done, what's the urgent that really isn't so important. And what he did was always address, if this is important, I'm going to get it done now so that it doesn't become urgent. Because then you have a problem. You don't do your best work when it becomes urgent. By the way, those people go, oh no, I write best under pressure. No, you don't. I have to read that. And I can say, no, you don't. But did you rewrite this? No, I didn't have time. Yeah, I write best under pressure. No, you don't. Right? You don't. Okay, so so you guys, it's not just using your time and being efficient, it's being really effective in what you do. And that means recognizing every day what is urgent and important, what is urgent but not important, what is important but not urgent, and it's recognizing what are the differences there. So this is according to Eisenhower. He said important activities have an outcome that leads to us achieving our goals, whether these are professional or personal. That's what. Now you guys, again, think about academics here. What are the important things that lead to you achieving your goal, which is maybe it's just getting through that degree, or it's getting through that degree well enough that you can go on for yet another degree or something else, right? Those are the important things. Urgent activities, and I can't say I agree 100% with this statement, but I'll tell you what he's actually saying here. Urgent activities, of course, they demand immediate attention. Now, according to Eisenhower, he said they might be more associated with achieving someone else's goals. That could be true, but it could be urgent to you too. It could be about your goals too. So, and we'll talk more about that. But these things, they demand attention, because if you don't do it, there's going to be a consequence. There's going to be an issue here. If you don't remember to register for your classes, if you don't remember to pay your tuition on time, if you don't respond to that job offer in a timely manner. Right? So in times urgent, I wouldn't always say they're about other people, but they certainly can be, and I'll talk more about that in a second. Okay, so this is basically what, according to Eisenhower, this is how you do it with that daily to-do list. Number one, that when you write down all of those things that you need to do, recognize, number one, which are the important things. This is about me or you achieving your goals, and they are time sensitive as well. So if they are important and urgent, you always do those things first. Okay, number two, important but not urgent. And this is key. This is why Eisenhower said, I don't let the important become urgent. I take care of them because they are important. I take care of them before they become urgent. So that's what you do next. Number three, not important but urgent. That is, like, not important means it's not going to stand in the way of you getting through your degree program, but it's just something you got to get done. You got to renew your driver's license at some point. Make sense? And then the last, not important and not urgent. So maybe that's finally mopping your floor, right? But recognizing the difference. And that's the key, you guys. Prioritizing is the key. Like, if you're really good at writing down everything you have to do, but you flip this list around, you're probably not any more ahead of the game, okay? So what I did was give you a list from Mind Tools, and they call it the ABCs of to-do list. Okay, so here's what they say. With this thing, what you do is you just randomly write down all that stuff that you have to do today. And then what they say is use A through F in terms of priorities. So you do all your A things first, then your B's, then your C's. I think A through F is a lot. I personally would just go A, B, C and be done with it. And you guys, if something ends up in the C category, what it means is if you don't get it done today, it goes on your to-do list for tomorrow, because it may be moving up to a B. Does that make sense to you guys? And then you kind of just tweak it so that it fits your style. All right. Does that make sense? Okay. So here's the thing, you guys. These three steps, this is systematically, this is time management. This is how you do it. But the thing is, you have to plan, you got to execute. Remember, if you plan and don't carry out, you're just a good planner. You're not a good time manager. Okay? So, yeah, planning followed by procrastination is still bad time management. You got to do it. Create it, follow them, to rip off Nike, just do it. Any questions on there? How are we feeling about that? Pretty easy? Yeah. It really is. It's really easy. Yeah. And it works. You know, this is how I do a lot of stuff every day. And, you know, sometimes I'm surprised at how much I get done in a day. But it's all, honestly, it's because I plan for everything that I have to do. All right. That one, let's go ahead and look, I'm looking at myself being recorded right now. That's weird. I don't like that. All right. Okay, so I need to switch out my PowerPoint. Y'all want to take like a little bio break or something? That means go potty or whatever, stretch, move around, lactate. And then we'll switch out my PowerPoint. And is my PowerPoint on this one? You got lactate.
No, sorry.
No? What?
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
just
Mary, what oh, nice. Where's that? Little checkbox,
Oh, I was gonna ask you, wait, 1 second. Put it right there. So I'll be in the center from 1 to 4, right? No, 12:34, it'll be 1 to 4. 4 to 4.
I know.
Oh. Wednesday, 12 to 4. Wait, how much is that? No, 13. That's fine. We should put this to 6 hours for 15. Oh wait, no, Thursday there's one Monday. Monday, I'm really so late. That's all. So only Monday and Tuesday. That's not really.
Got frantic texted.
Five and a half hours right here. 5.5. 11 and a half. Yeah, 15. Yeah, seems about, yeah. That's what I did when you got into sport. It makes sense. Not makes sense. But on Thursday, just go back to
Someone else.
you're gonna be coming.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then there's cats.
Yeah.
6:30. Oh, closing at 7? Yeah. Like you don't leave at 6:30. Like everyone leaves at 6:30, so you gotta close.
Now inspired.
I'm putting your mind thing. So that's what I'm saying. Like we have you from 1 to 7. Technically, it's from 1 to 7. But it's from me there 1 to 7.
Oh, you're getting.
But I'm gonna work yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But I'm saying we have flexibility there. Just make sure you cover it out of the whole. Unless you do the hours.
Like, no. Like, this guy was like, yeah. I can just start.
The next one, yeah, right, so I do. What do you feel like?
One day I'm gonna play, and one day I'm.
Yeah.
I'm like.
No, the first thing you get
Well, I read.
Yeah.
first week. Oh, next hours? How about, yeah, no. And the meeting with the call was from 10 to what? So we take off time. Don't count the lunch. No, take off 8 hours.
Yeah, okay.
You know what I mean? That's-
Yeah.
Meeting yeah, that one was from 5:30. Like that's and then like how yeah, I got there at 8. We got there at 8:30. And then after Three? I'm gonna say when you're gonna clock in on time, it's more than 5 hours. Like you're gonna have a so pretty sure. Or you saw me here, like so it's 10, 3
All right, let's go ahead and get started. So the next one I want to do is probably the second most popular one, which is not as much about listening. It's really about note-taking. Because believe it or not, you don't just have to be a little stenographer and write down every single word verbatim. I always, my students, I'm like, you're not writing the gospel according to Dr. B, right? You're not doing that. So I developed this one, again, for options for note-taking. And you guys, it's not a one-size-fits-all for every single class. You have to adopt your note-taking technique to the style of the class as well. Okay, so the bulk of this one really is more about note-taking. I give you some stuff for listening skills later, and then we will go from there. But, okay, one of the things is when the note-taking thing, and this was from the very first group of students when I taught that, note-taking, what I heard them saying was, cool, she's going to give me all the shortcuts, all the way to get the best grades possible with doing as little as I can. And what I want to say is that I'm not waving a magic wand here. If you take notes correctly, it is labor intensive, but there's a point to doing it this way. Okay, so there are no shortcuts. If anything, I'm probably going to make your note-taking a little more labor intensive, but in the long run, it'll actually be less work. Okay, so first of all, you guys, I want you to think of note-taking not as just something to do, because that's what everybody does in class. Note-taking is already part of actively studying. for exams or preparing to write a paper or whatever. It's not just about writing every word down that the teacher says. This is just as important because this is the foundation for all of your studying for every exam that you take from here on out. And the thing is, if you start thinking about notes differently and crafting them differently, number one, you're going to understand things better because you're going to move out of that becoming, you know, a regurgitator of every word your teacher said, and you're going to start to put it into your own words. Believe it or not, most teachers would rather have you say something in your own words, and it might not be as eloquent as the teacher who said it 100 times. It might not be as eloquent, but I know you understand, right? If you're writing an essay for an exam, I don't expect it to be perfectly crafted. It's an exam. You got one shot. Get it out on paper. I would rather it be in your own words, not so well crafted, but I know you know. If you regurgitate what I said, all I know is you memorized that paragraph really well. Big difference. And so, but the thing is, I think we're also accustomed, we just write down every word. What did she say? What did she say? Right. And then you memorize exactly what the teacher has said. That's not where you need to be, particularly as grad students. You need to step out of that memorization stuff. That's lower order thinking. You need to start creating your own ideas and connecting ideas and things like that. And so to do that, you've got to get out of that kind of regurgitation mindset. Other things too, you guys, if you follow the stuff with note taking, you're going to be so much better prepared to write well-crafted essays. And you know how you study differently for essay exams versus multiple choice? You know what I'm talking about? Right, multiple choice, what students hear is that it's going to be no. But if you do use this system for note taking, you're always going to be studying at that level for essays, even though you might not necessarily need to have that much, but it's just, and do you guys know what I'm talking about? Don't you study, aren't you better prepared for an exam that you know is all essay versus one that's multiple choice? If you're taking notes correctly, you're always going to be at this upper end of being prepared. And wouldn't that be tragic to actually go into an exam so over-prepared that you walk out of there with an A? Tragic, right? That's actually a good thing. The other thing too is now, exam revision, you probably have not done that before because typically with undergrads, we don't do exam revision, mostly because we don't have the time. But you may, as a grad student, get an option for what's called exam revision. And what that means, you guys, take your exam, okay, here's your grade. The teacher will, the next time you go in, the teacher will hand back your exam and say, you have 30 minutes to make any revisions that you want. I know, it's awesome. And the thing is too, if you're, and a lot of times those exam revisions, you can use your notes. And it actually becomes more about you learning, filling in all those gaps that you left out. But if you have really well-crafted notes, you can make really good use of that 30 minutes, right? And so you might see that. I don't think I've ever seen it with undergrads. I had one class as an undergrad where we got to do that. And it was optional. So if you got an A, it's really, doesn't need to be any higher than that. But so yeah, it may be important, particularly as grad students. The other thing too is because you're going to step out of being a regurgitator, it's going to help you assess, am I really understanding this stuff or not? All right. So you guys, note taking is really, it's more than that one step of showing up to the lecture and writing down everything as quickly as you can. And that's the problem that I see with most every student. They do step one and then that's it. And the thing is, it's probably the more important stuff is what you do after that with your notes. The reality is what you should be doing is when you sit down to do that study for that exam, you should no longer have to have your textbook with you. You don't need anything. You've got everything you need. You are crafting your notes into everything that you need to be prepared for that exam. And that's why you have to do things later like summarize, condense, organize it. Right? And that's the step two part that people don't do, or if they do it, they're doing it the night before the exam, which is not a good way to go. So the other thing too, you guys, is the more times you go back and you get into your notes and you summarize and you revise and all that kind of stuff, that is a form of study. right? How many of you do this? How many of you like to rewrite your notes after a lecture? Okay, and which I did too. Why do you do that?
Like my own words, especially like some of the professors in the department, their slides are like paragraphs.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, so it was like last semester we took a fluency course and it was just 3 paragraphs, maybe like 7 like point font. It was really bad, so I definitely had to. Yeah.
Who else likes to do that? Did you raise your hand? Who likes to rewrite notes? Why do you rewrite your notes?
It just kind of helps me like refresh the memory and like kind of review at the same time.
That's what studying is, right? Anybody else like to do it? Anybody else rewrite notes? You like to rewrite notes? Why do you do it?
Well, yeah, also with the memory, and also I could highlight certain things I wanted to focus on.
Perfect. Yeah. And see that now, if you guys, it doesn't mean you have to rewrite all your notes, but for those of you who do that, that really is a form of studying, and this is great. Highlighting things, asking questions, that's great. That's absolutely what you should be doing with this. Okay, so you guys, there's really 4 major types of notes. The first one, I call it the stenographer. Have any of you seen the skit on Saturday Night Live? I feel like most of you are probably not old enough, but there was a stenographer, and I couldn't find a video, but that's pretty much how she looked the whole time. But, and so you all know what a stenographer is in the courtroom? Every single word, every word, all right? The weirdest little, like, how do they do that? But it's every single word. Now, you guys, that's actually called sequential notes. I call it the stenographer method. Probably the least effective out of everything, but most commonly used. Because as a student, and I've asked students, why do you feel like you have to write down every single word I say? Because I'm not sure if it's important or not. No, okay, I'm saying it. But you might not have to write down every single word. The funny thing is, I think, do some of you do that? You feel like I have to write down every single word? Because you don't. Think about when you send a text message. How many of you are like, how are you? I'm fine. Hope to see you later for lunch. It's like, you good? Later, lunch, right? You don't need all of that stuff. You do it with text messaging, and when you get that message, don't you know what they mean? So, okay. So the whole thing, the stenographer method, I think most students use it just really because they're too scared not to. They're too scared not to write down every single word. And I'm here to tell you that you are allowed to not write down every single word. It's never the gospel according to Dr. Whoever. It's not. Plus, you guys, if you're crafting your notes into what they should be, you're going to be filling in any blanks that you don't have anyway. We're going to get there. But so now when the stenographer method does work reasonably well, you know, if you've got a history class and you're recording dates, people, that's great. But even still, you don't have to write down every single word. So I'm not saying don't use the stenographer method. If it works for you, great. It's probably not the most efficient thing, and there are better ways to go. But if that's what you're comfortable with and you're just freaked out by not having the gospel written down and then rewritten the gospel, you go ahead and use it. But there are some real problems with it, and I think when I show you your next method, you might think, oh, that might be better. So we're going to get out of the stenographer. The annotated system, this is also called the Cornell method. This is actually, you guys, I was taught the Cornell method when I went to grad school, and that's what I used the whole rest of the time. I used it in every class in grad school. I used it through my doctoral program, and I think it works. It's really great because you end up with your notes being everything you need. So I put a paper in there that kind of guideline or is an outline for the Cornell method. And if you use the Cornell method, if you do this correctly, you don't really have to rewrite your notes, although you might want to just because that's what you like to do. But the Cornell method I found was the easiest way to get everything I needed in my notes. I got questions answered. I got things highlighted. I got things explained. Now it's called the annotated method. You guys know what like an annotated bibliography is? Or do you know what it means when something is annotated? It means you add detail. You add text to it. So what you do is you take your notes and then you annotate them. You're going to add to them, right? Okay, here's the easiest thing. And I really like this one. You guys might want to add a few little things on here. But basically what you do is you take your paper. You can buy Cornell Method paper like on Amazon and stuff. Or if you're just like me, okay, right here, I'm going to write this stuff. But where you take your notes is in that 6-inch column over here on the right. So right here, that's where you record everything. That's where you take your notes from class. Okay, we get on there so far. And what it does dramatically, it will reduce what you get on a single paper because you've got 2 inches down here. You've also got 2.5 inches over here for other stuff. So, and that's part of why this works really well, is you typically are not going to end up with 4 or 5 topics on one piece of paper. That's another thing too, is, you know, leave yourself room when you're note taking. I've never understood why students feel like they have to write in 5 font or something. You can kill trees. We'll get back later. All right, so you record it here. At the bottom down here, you summarize. You guys, this is one of those things, you know, when I said go back and review? When you review within that 24 hours, write a brief summary here of what is on this. And start putting it in your own words. One of the ways this helps is if you're, I see students do this all the time. Hey guys, finding your notes where we talked about ATP production. Or even worse, I had one guy would open his backpack and just start taking. Right? But you know how you're looking for something, you don't know where it is? Lots easier if you could just go along that summary sheet at the bottom. So do that summary thing. Then, this is where you reduce it. And over here, that's where you take all of those words and you write, sup, lunch, yes? Right? Reduce it. You don't have to keep studying with all of the language. Now, this is the other thing too. In here where you're reducing it, this is also too, if you need to add some stuff from your textbook on that is where you're going to add it. If on this page, if you have questions, this is a great place to start putting those questions on there. So on here, they gave you stuff like in terms of reciting it and reflecting on it. And that's all fine and good. But I just wanted to give you sort of the nuts and bolts. Write your notes here. Write your summary here. Reduce it over here. If you need to add some of that annotation, some of that detail from your textbook. But you guys, you should have everything you need from the lecture, from the textbook. It's now starting to get into your own words. It's becoming more manageable. But get out of all of the text, right? I know when I have students tell me, I don't know why I didn't do so good on that exam. I read the book like 8 times. Why? It doesn't say anything different, right? The problem was get out of all the text. You don't get to understanding until you get out of all of those words. All right. So does this kind of make sense to y'all for how to do this? This, honestly, you guys, this is what I used from the time I learned it. I had sort of, it was not really a summer bridge thing, but it was sort of a how to be successful. And this was one of the things they taught us. And at first I was like, man, this seems like a lot of work, a lot more paper. But in the long run, just by doing this, I was already studying for classes, already doing the preview, review, already. So I think this is a great way to go. Okay, another way, now I don't think concept mapping is a good way to take notes. I think it's a good way to organize your notes. Are any of you familiar with the concept map? I teach my students this all the time. Basically, it's kind of like taking a central concept and then building a tree or a diagram. And so what you do is you start with a central topic and then you branch out from there. And so you guys, the easiest way is, hang on, here's a really simple one. The topic is animals. Subtopics, animals that live on land. Lizards, tigers, Then I have animals that live in the water, like fish, and dolphins. I should have mermaids, sharks. Then I have animals that fly in the sky, like birds, like ducks, like geese, pets, which could be some of these too, but guinea pigs, cats, dogs, turtles. Okay, think about how much language that would take if you were to write all of that stuff out. Okay, now when you start doing concept maps, you are reducing it. You are starting to create understanding beyond just regurgitating the language. So now, you guys, concept maps, they are always listed as a way of note taking. I don't think you should ever take notes in a class trying to create a concept map. You would have to know where the teacher is going in the lecture. But it's a great way to reduce your notes. Okay. So I think concept maps are great. I encourage my students, particularly in physiology, let's get out of all the words and let's start making a concept map for all of this stuff and how it affects this system and this hormone and what it does, right? So those are concept maps. The last one, matrices, that's the plural of matrix. But matrix, now again, you guys, a matrix is not a good way to take notes. It's a good way to organize your notes. And I'll tell you when a matrix works well is if you've got, maybe you're in a psychology class and you've got 3 different theories that explain the same behavior. Making a matrix will allow you to break down each theory based in the same way. And then you know that compare and contrast, what's similar and what's different. So that's when using a matrix is really good. So I made a matrix for this, right? Okay, so what I did with my matrix, these are the 3 types of note-taking that I talked about. Sequential, which is your stenographer. Cornell method, your annotated notes. The concept map, and the matrix. And then what I did was, well, what are the uses for each one of these? Well, the use here, it's just traditional. It doesn't really serve a whole lot of purpose. Here, this is really good. Annotated notes, really good for summarizing, annotating, adding the detail on there. Well, mapping, this is really good to see relationships and ideas. The matrix, also seeing relationships and ideas. What are the benefits? Well, it's convenient for the stenographer. But here, reorganization, encourages reflection. Here, this one talks about discovering relationships, etc. Remember, you guys, I think here, mapping and matrices for you, for grad students, are really important because we want you to get out of that lower order thinking and start seeing relationships. Discovering some of your own ideas, right? Having some of your own creative thoughts, problem solving. And then I also chose the format. How do we do it? Well, here we have verbatim notes. This explains the Cornell, the paper that I showed you. This is how you create a concept map. Key ideas surrounding this stuff. And then a table like this one. But I think just showing you, does that make sense? So again, not a way to take notes. This is a way to organize your notes. I'm going to try to sell you on the Cornell method as much as possible. But then depending what you get, this is going to help you summarize and break it down. Any of that look appetizing? Does it at least seem better than writing down the gospel according to whoever? Okay. All right. So then this is just some stuff on improving your note-taking. And it's like sort of tips and things like that. Ideally, you want to make your notes clear and accurate. Now, you guys, clear doesn't mean you can read them. That's later. That's called legible. Clear means that you get the idea written down. And I know this is the hardest part because, you know, I'm talking to you and I don't want you to write down every word I say. I want you to think about it, synthesize it, now write it down in your own words. What's the problem? I moved on to the next topic, right? And so a lot of times, teachers are your biggest enemy when it comes to doing this because God knows we're not going to give you time. I gotta go, I gotta keep going. But so I get it. And what I would suggest for you is ask every teacher you have if you can record their lecture, right? all you have to have is permission from the teacher. If they say no, I don't question it. They're not going to change their mind. But you're going to have an awful lot of them that say, yeah, no problem. You know, believe it or not, most teachers, we actually want our students to do well. We do. So it may be that by recording it, it allows you to get out of that stenographer mentality so that later you can write down those slips of their notes. You will do better at note taking if you come to class prepared. Remember preview to create context. And you know, when students go, well, I don't know what's important. If you had some context, maybe you would. So that preview thing can actually help you take better notes. A good thing to do, every class you have, you guys, get a good study partner. So you know you got to be careful with those, right? You don't want this kind of just pulls you down. You want a good study partner, but a really good thing to do, compare your notes with somebody and do it on a routine basis. While you are in class, minimize distractions. I can't tell you how many times I have a student and I can see them on their phone. I can tell they're surfing the web, and then they'll ask me a question that somebody just asked. Or they'll ask me, can I repeat that? And it's like, well, I mean, or this is what if somebody just asked the question and I just answered it, I'll go, can anybody answer that? And the whole class will be like, okay, but minimize distractions, and I'm going to tell you straight up, put your phone away. I swear you are not going to die, right? You can have it surgically removed from the palm of your hand. But honestly, put that phone away, right? Free yourself up to be engaged in the classroom. Put your phone away. When you are studying, put your phone away. Put it away. I guarantee it. I have colleagues that when we work together, there are always some of us who check our phone at the door. There are others, and here we're all working. You did this one. What'd you get done? Teachers are just as bad. But really, you guys, minimize distractions in there, right? If you're using your laptop to take notes, stay on that task. It's too easy to see what's happening on Instagram or whatever. Just don't do it, right? Minimize distractions. Organize your notes. I think the Cornell method is a great way to do that. Use abbreviations and symbols. Okay, any of you who are going to be a clinician, you are going to live your life using abbreviations and symbols. I know this because I'm also a clinician. Teaching is my second career. But you know, every chart I ever wrote, which you write it as quickly as you can, as legibly as possible. I mean, it is nothing but notes. I would have a patient look at their own chart going, what does this even mean? Oh, well, I did blah, 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 blah. That says all that? Yes, it does. Now, I know as a student, you guys, as a young student, I was always afraid to use abbreviations because I thought I would forget what the abbreviation meant, right? So I'd write the abbreviation out, but then I'd write it all out anyway, and it actually took me more time. The good news for you is that abbreviations are pretty standard, and if you forget what it is, just Google it. Mama didn't have Google 100 years ago. So, but honestly, abbreviations and symbols are going to save you for sure. Ideally, write clearly. That should say legibly if you can. If you're me, I have a hard time writing legibly. So a lot of times I had to rewrite my notes just so that they would be legible. That's just me. But ideally, if you can get them legible. Again, review your notes, write down questions. I love that you said that. What's your name? Angela. Remember what Angela said, if I have questions? That is such a good way to go. And if you do that after class and you write down that this is the question, when you ask that question, the very next class. Don't wait until 2 weeks later and then you go, I know I had a question, but I don't know what it was. Well, I don't know what it was either, Angela. So do that, you guys. You should go to class if you've got a question. Put your hand up at the very beginning. Plus, how impressive is it when you say, I have a question about our last lecture. You're a different kind of student, aren't you? Okay, you guys, this is really quickly, this is reference to that forgetting curve. And this is why, too, you guys, be engaged with your notes all the time. Think of your notes different than what you have been using them for. Be constantly developing and crafting your notes into that everything you need to study. What this does is illustrate that forgetting curve. Here's the bottom line. These are people who looked at their notes. These are people who didn't look at their notes so much. And this is what they remember. And we know that decay starts within 24 hours and it picks up speed the longer you go. So that if you waited 3 weeks and now you got an exam, you will be teaching yourself everything from scratch. Not a good way to go. Then in terms of listening, and I have all, this is all in your notes, so you don't need to take notes on it. Well, that's convenient. Okay, so I think one of the things, if I could encourage you to do this, is once you get out of the whole stenographer mentality, you can actually start listening to what the teacher's saying. When you're trying to be a stenographer, you're just hearing words, but you're not putting anything together. And so, and I know it's going to take us like a bit of bravery to get out of that stenography mentality. But once you do that, you free yourself up to now start listening for more meaning. Okay. It's okay to adjust your style to the lecture. Totally okay to do that. I mean, you know, you take notes differently if you've got the PowerPoint slides versus if you don't, right? So adjust it, use what works. The Cornell method might not work in every class. I can't imagine it would work in a math class. I just can't imagine that would go very well. So adjust it. Tackle the difficult to understand material first. Tackle that first. When you're going through your notes, because isn't the easiest thing to say, well, I don't really get that. It's probably not important. I won't worry about that. It's only the most important thing. So tackle the difficult to understand material first. You guys, ideally in a lecture, try to pay attention. It's hard to take good notes if you're not paying attention. That corner is amazing. Come together. So try to pay attention. I think coming class prepared makes it easier to listen to the lecture. Again, it's creating context. You guys, some of this is redundant, but it all comes from, kind of I've compiled things from different sources. Try to focus on what's important. Again, creating context, I think, will help with that. Choose to be interested. You can choose to be not interested. Choose, if you can, to be interested in the material. And I know sometimes it's hard. I remember sitting through lectures that I thought, I'm pretty much going to die right now. I remember that. But ideally, you can choose to be interested. Hopefully it'll be easier. I think as grad students, it's easier because the higher you go in education, the more the onus of what you learn gets shifted to you. As an undergrad, we pretty much tell you 95% of what you have to know to get your degree. When you go to a master's program, we don't give you as much. We let you start to explore those areas that you want to look at. You know, what is it in public health that you want to study? What is it in terms of healthcare administration? You know, is it a specific type of administration? If you go on for a doctorate degree, the onus is almost completely on you. You get to choose that one area. I want to be an expert. And so, and that's the thing is, I think the higher you go, the easier it is to be interested because you get to decide, well, how can I be not interested in what I'm interested in? Right? So hopefully that's not going to be as big of an issue for you. You guys have any questions on that stuff? Maybe it will help on that. All right. That's all I got for you. Go out in the world, do good. Still have my